Okay, greetings and welcome to the Galley's Pan-African Community News Update. Today's date is the 12th of May 2024, and as you probably know, I'm Brother Dr. Toyin Agbetu in the studio with, hopefully you can see there, Sister Oleander.
Greetings all.
We hope that you're okay. Sister Oleander, are you good?
Yes, very good. I mean, who can't be good on a day like this? The sun has been beautiful all day.
Oh, most definitely. Unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to go out in it, but I've seen it shining through the windows. So just as ever, I'm just going to let you know that Sister Oleander is going to be watching the chat. So if you could give us a sound check, let us know that you can see and hear us okay. You can drop a message to us on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Like I said, it's your program. You're welcome to interact. As ever, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share, and all that kind of stuff if you find the broadcast useful. And as ever, we're going to start with libations to those that have recently passed or mention any notable anniversaries. Okay. And the first passing is to the notable drum and bass pioneer, our brother MC Conrad, otherwise known as Conrad Thompson. Now, he joined the ancestors aged 32. No cause of death has actually been given yet. And for over 30 years, Conrad was known as one of the most foremost voices of rave culture and especially drum and bass. He was a pioneering MC. He had a very particular style. He also produced music and ran his own label, Resonance, which some of you may remember. Some of his famous tracks included Words to Be Heard, What Meets the Western, Still You Want More, and Merchant Blessings. Now, when I said that he was also a pioneer, he didn't just make music and kind of like an MC. He also spoke about rights, championing more royalties for appearances from MCs on tracks. He had a desire to make sure that the treatment of MCs and their remuneration was actually fair and equitable. Like I said, he's joined the ancestors. We remember. Now, the next libation is one that most of you are familiar with, and that's the passing of the young 14-year-old schoolboy known as Daniel Anjorin. Now, our young son passed away in hospital after being stabbed in Hainault, where alongside 4 other people, including 2 police officers, were seriously injured. Now, a 36-year-old man has been arrested at the scene, or was arrested at the scene on suspicion of murder, and is in police custody. I think he's actually, the first date in court has taken place. He's been charged. Daniel's school, which was called Bancroft, said that Daniel was a true scholar who had a positive nature and a gentle character. A family friend of Daniel said that he was an amazing young man. He was good at his studies, he was good at his sports, and he was very, very much loved by many, many people and came from a wonderful family. The whole family, as you can imagine, are in shock, and obviously they are heartbroken. It's very sad that this story seems to be moved away from now the media spotlight. There's not much talking on this. Normally, kind of when a young person is murdered in such a tragic way, we kind of reflect on these issues a bit longer, but because it coincided with the local elections, it seems like the media has decided there's no point talking about this anymore and actually learning anything from this. But we remember. The next passing is an in remembrance one, actually. This is the name that you might know of Kelso Benjamin Cochrane. Now, Kelso was one of the earliest victims of racialized violence in the UK, especially targeting Africans from the Caribbean in London. He was born in Antigua in 1926 to a working class family. He was a carpenter when he moved to the UK in 1954. Now, on May the 17th, 1959, 3 weeks before his planned wedding, he was murdered by 6 European men. Now, Kelso's actual murderers were never brought to justice, despite the names of one of them being known, Pat Digby. Now, from what I can tell, Pat Digby obviously has passed away. Now, we know that name because there's an author named Mark Alden, and you can see the book Murder in Notting Hill. I did some thorough investigation through researching documents in the National Archives, and he discovered that the government and the police at the time were so fearful that the death would lead to a repeat of race riots that had taken place that they kind of like squashed it. That's what it seems like was going on. The race riots that had previously taken place were based in Notting Hill and other areas of the UK. So we still haven't seen justice for Kelso Cochrane. You may see in the image there's a house that's been named after him, Kelso Cochrane House on Kensal Road. I think there's going to be a plaque erected in remembrance to him in the next week or so. I think it might be next Saturday. But today, we remember. The next libation is to an artist, actually also a friend, the amazing influential rapper Ty, also known as Chijoke, or Benedict Chijoke, full name. He was a pioneer in UK hip hop. His thoughtful lyrics, clever storytelling, and his beats, often infused with elements of jazz, brought him a 2004 Mercury Prize nomination. Ty was an amazingly warm and kind-hearted young man. He passed too young. As a keen cyclist, that's one thing that I always like to chat with him. He criticised the position of UK hip-hop artists in the music industry and the lack of recognition for the genre overall, which actually struggled to gain mainstream attention. Now, now there's been changes and we've seen some improvements, but even back then when he talks about it, he describes the way that artists like himself were treated were like a bunch of black boys trying to get on their playlist. And that's it. That's what he felt, and that's what was going on. He joined the Ancestors in 2020, and for many of us, it was a tragic loss that hit hard. We remember. The next libation is it's one to Brian Douglas, who joined the Ancestors in May 1995. Now, Brian was a music and boxing promoter. He was arrested in South London not long after midnight on the 3rd of May in 1995. Don't have all the details of his arrest, but it's irrelevant because during his arrest, he was clubbed on the head by the police, who claimed to be acting in self-defense. Witnesses said that's not true. Now, PC Harrison and Tuffy, who were the ones who clubbed him, claimed that he had been struck on his upper arm, and then, when they hit him with this baton, it was an American-style baton that had been introduced into the UK, that it slid over his shoulder and hit his neck. Now, these allegations which they made were completely poo-pooed over. They were denied by the expert medical testimony of 3 pathologists in the inquest, and they all agreed that Brian had been struck on the back of his head. At the inquest, the jury was also told that despite Brian vomiting in his cell and clearly being in distress, he was not taken to hospital until more than 12 hours after he'd been injured. He passed, as we now know, but the jury were unable to reach a verdict of unlawful killing, and they returned his death, his murder, as a misadventure. As such, there's been no disciplinary action taken against either of the officers, and the Crown Prosecution Service brought no charges. Brian had a son, a brother, and a sister. His final last words to his sister, Brenda, was "sort it." Deaths in custody in our community in the UK is a long-going issue, and Brian, we haven't sorted it yet, but we remember and do our best. Moving a little away from these aisles as an act of remembrance, I want to take you to the LA verdicts and the uprisings that accompanied them after the not guilty verdict. Now, this is what happened in Los Angeles after a jury acquitted 4 Euro-American police officers who were found beating up Rodney King. Now, many people might not be familiar with the story of Rodney King, and I suggest if you're not familiar with that history, you should really check it out, because nowadays we have smartphones and it's quite common to see footage of police assault and brutality and corruption being shared on social media. But back in the day, it was quite extraordinary. And so when the footage was leaked and we were to see what happened, it was an amazing time. The trial was all over the media. And the fact that the jury acquitted him, it was obviously a jury of all Europeans, just like the police officers. The result was well, I don't know, it's explosive. There was an uprising that lasted several days. 55 people were killed, 2,000 injured, around 12,000 were arrested. And in the end, the National Guard were deployed to restore order. Damage to property is estimated to be in the region of $1 billion. You know, these miscarriages of justice still continue to happen. These forms of brutality by the police still happen. This is what happened in America back then. It's just a reminder of what could still happen and still does take place now. Rodney King later received $3.8 million in damages from the city of Los Angeles. And I'm sharing this really not just because it's the anniversary of the verdict, but also because there's a parallel with the current worldwide student protests and the BDS movements against genocide in Palestine. You know, the parallels are too close, and you can see that the students who are now, like I said, worldwide, you see the police attacking students in America. You see the violence taking place across Europe. In the UK, that violence hasn't been to such a level, which is quite good. But it does remind me about often the protests, the student protests that took place in the late 1960s, which were against apartheid. The narrative is the same. You know, the students today are protesting against apartheid in Palestine and the genocide, and students back then were protesting against similar things in Azania or South Africa. The state that was involved was one that came from settler colonialism, and Israel was involved in both, in Azania, in supporting the apartheid regime, and of course, in this particular case, carrying the atrocities against the Palestinian people. So this is a very important story, and there's a lot of parallel for us to think on. So we remember that. But out of all that, we should also remember that 30 years ago, in South Africa, the country elected, or its first democratically elected president was Nelson Mandela, and he was sworn into office during the first ever multi-ethnic election, following 46 years of the oppressive apartheid regime. Now, the freedom fighter who served from 1994 to 1999 was the country's first African head of state. In 18 days, nearly 28 million South Africans registered to vote. And yeah, you know, they made history. And this was something that, you know, we hope will see lead to changes, obviously, in South Africa and, of course, in other regions of the world. This year is what we call the year of elections. There's elections all over the place. Again, this story has resonance with what's taking place around the world today. This amazing achievement of having our freedom fighter Nelson Mandela, now ancestor, sworn in as the first democratically elected president, came about through student protests, through BDS movements, BDS being boycott, divestment, and sanctions against rogue states. I remember the activist and musician Spartacus. He was so inspiring to me. He was one of those who, informed actions, BDS actions. He would go to supermarkets and label kind of like products from South Africa as blood products and kind of like to be boycotted. And one of the things that we're hearing now, about how, if you want to proof that BDS does work, or the BDS strategy does work, is that Trinity College in Cambridge University is saying they're going to divest its interests in some of the military organizations that they have funds in that make weapons that are being used against the Palestinian people. Now, I only just received that in the last few minutes, so I haven't had a chance to check out all the information. But if this is the case, then that's really good news. Many people think that boycotts, divestments, and sanctions, these kind of protests, these encampments, don't do anything, but they do. They all add drip, 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 international pressure on rogue states and rogue actors. So we remember. The last libation for this week's program is one about the Move family in Philadelphia. Again, we're outside the UK, and tomorrow, exactly, there's the anniversary of the day that the city of Philadelphia dropped a combat bomb laced with Tovex and C4 explosions on the Move organization. I say Move organization because they were organized, but they were also a group and living in a home occupied by men, women, and children. They were family. They took the name Africa, so all of them had Africa as the surname. Now, that bombing, which was sanctioned by the state, saw 11 people killed, including the 5 children and the founder of the organization. 61 homes were destroyed, and more than 250 people were left homeless. Now, only 2 people survived the bombing. Ramona Africa, then 29, and a child called Birdie Africa, who was then 13 at the time. Both were badly burnt, as you could imagine. They had no chance of escaping when they were bombed in this way. And despite 2 grand jury investigations, a civil suit, and a commission that cited that the bombing was a reckless, ill-conceived, and hastily approved act, no one was ever criminally charged for the attack. The bombing on the Move family or the Move organization is one of those outrageous crimes that still stands, just like the bombing of Black Wall Street, as they call it. And, again, we've seen so many people escape justice. But on this anniversary of that particular day, we remember. Okay. That's it. You are watching Legali's Pan-African Community News Update. Today's date is the 12th? The 12th of May. If you're watching live, you're welcome to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. If you're on Facebook, it'd be helpful if you could share this, because I think it's not going out on my personal Facebook page, which has more subscribers or more people who are alerted to it. So if you are watching on Facebook, please just put it in the feed so other people can see if you want to join in live. And of course, don't forget to subscribe yourself, like, and share if you find this broadcast useful. So, Toyin.
Yes, we have Grand Rising All wishes from N.
Grand Risings to you too as well. Okay, so the next section is UK news. It's good to know that you can actually hear us and see us. Like I said, though, there's limited access on Facebook today for some reason. So if you are watching on Facebook, please just share it somewhere so that other people can actually watch and share and join in if they want to watch it live. Of course, if not, it should be available as a recording after the event. And I'm going to move on with the story because we've got a lot to go through. So I'm going to return to the story of our young son, and that's the 14-year-old Daniel Anjorin, who was murdered, on his way to school. But what I'm going to highlight is the shameful, disgusting way that the Sun newspaper referred to him as a sword lad on their front page. Now, this headline wasn't only deeply insensitive, but it's a reminder of the media's entrenched Afrophobia. There's also a comment on the Metro, which refers to his murderer, Marcus Munzer, as a mystic samurai suspect. Now, obviously, Daniel deserved to live a full life. I mean, he didn't deserve this, right? He should have been able to live his life out and achieve his dreams and engage in everything that we all hope to. Now, to its credit, there was a respectful tribute at Arsenal during the match. There was a minute's applause in the 14th minute dedicated to him because Daniel was a Arsenal supporter. But this disgusting rendering of his murder on the front page in these newspapers really highlights the contempt, the lack of respect, the willingness to dehumanize us even in death. I know there are some people making a complaint to the IPSO, which is the Independent Press Standards Organization, something like that, or Ombudsman. But having used that before, that organization, it won't change anything, I can tell you. I mean, make the complaint if you want to. You can convince others to make the complaint, but it won't make a difference. What we need to do to make a difference is convince all our friends, all our family, all our colleagues to stop buying these Afrophobic newspapers. Just stop buying them. Don't read them. I'm going to move on to the next story. And this one is about Pa Kinta, who is a young man who passed away from heart failure after he was, an inquest concluded, the jury concluded, lawfully restrained by shopkeepers. Now, Mamadou Pa Kinta, Pa is his nickname, he was Gambian born. He had an episode, a paranoid knife wielding episode. I want to be really honest with you about this. So he felt that he was being chased by people who wanted to kill him. This is what he told the shopkeepers when he came into their shop. So he ran into this shop, with these knives, and the shopkeepers obviously were petrified and they restrained him. Now, it was only once he started getting very agitated that they really decided to use more force on him. His behavior that particular afternoon was said to be completely out of character with him. And when the police arrived, they found him still being restrained in the shop, and the officers handcuffed him in the front stack position. Now, the front stack position is what you can see in the image, where they place your hand in that kind of like configuration and put the handcuffs on you. And I thought I'd show this because I had to, kind of like remind us that often when the police are deployed to, situations where people are in mental distress, they often go in with so much force, and they use the explanation of excited delirium or positional asphyxia for when they end up kind of like using so much force, they kill our people. That's not the case in this particular instance. It does look like he had a heart attack after this whole episode. The family of Pa has said those who were fortunate to cross him knew he was more than just a nice person. He was a pillar of support, a beacon of hope, and a friend to all. His commitment to helping others extended beyond borders, and he dedicated himself to supporting children in Gambia through a training school for boxing. They said that his generosity knew no limits, and his legacy for giving continues to uplift and inspire countless lives. I don't know what to say on this one. I just thought I'm sharing the news with you. The issue of mental health and policing and violence and death is one that we need to always keep our eye on. This case, like I said, it wasn't the police who were involved in that. The shopkeepers are the ones. But it's very easy for people to critique them. I don't know, what you would do if someone came into a shop with a knife, saying that he had been chased by people wanting to kill him and started stabbing boxes and things around him. So I feel like to say we remember. I'm not sure when he passed, but we will remember and we will learn from this. My condolences to the family. This is a follow-up on a story that we touched upon in a previous broadcast, and that's of Boya Odubanjo, who was last seen at the Shambhala Festival in North Hampshire in August 2023. Now, you may remember his body was found in a lake on the site 5 days later. We had no idea what was going on. Well, now we've found out, I think from an inquest, that a pathologist has said that he had drugs in his system at a level that would interfere with his cognitive and motor functions. Now, our brother had been studying for a PhD in creative writing at the University of Hertfordshire. Unfortunately, the toxicology report, which was presented to the court, revealed that his body had found traces of alcohol, ketamine, and ecstasy. This is what led to him having impaired cognitive and motor functions. Now, his family actually believe he would be alive had he received adequate care. And they've said that they're going to cherish his loud laughter, his calm measuredness, his sharp intellect, and his love, all of which will continue to warm the hearts of his family, friends, and writing community. This is just an update on the story and the reminder that his collection, Auntie Uncle Poems, was a winner of the Poetry Business New Poets Prize in 2020. It's a tragic loss, we remember. The next story that hit the news is one about a study by the University of Warwick, which reveals that half of the primary schools in the UK, in fact over half, around 55%, have no teachers from a minority ethnic background. And there's still a long way to go before the school and workforce becomes representative of the pupils that they teach. Now, this report also warns that the ethnic and gender diversity is even lower amongst senior roles in schools, and almost 9 in 10 schools did not have a senior leader from a minority ethnic community last year when this report was commissioned. Now, as you can expect, analysis from the Department of Education has revealed that 25% of the schools in the state-funded sector did not have a male classroom teacher, and this is something that's an ongoing issue in the schools. There's just that problem about not seeing people from minority backgrounds, not seeing people with different levels of ableism, not seeing people different genders. We know, and this is a comment that's been made, that ethnic minority students and young boys are missing out by not having teachers that represent them. So I'm just sharing this news. Next story is come from it's a story about the Reverend Rose Hudson Wilkin. Now, she's a prominent Church of England bishop, and it's a nice story because she's actually come out and praised the protesters who successfully disrupted the Home Office attempts to move asylum seekers to that ridiculous Bibby Stockholm barge in Dorset. Now, her words would definitely put her in conflict with that coming from Downing Street, but she has said that she thanks the local people who blocked the buses, and that the Lord showed compassion for the most vulnerable. And this is after a number 10 spokesperson said that the protests were unacceptable. And this is not, a nice, refreshing story to read, because often what happens is that many people stay silent in our community on these kind of issues. They don't, those who are in positions of some kind of celebrity or authority don't like to stand out when human rights are being abused. So it's good that our sister Rose is actually saying this. You'd think so, being someone, what they call someone from the cloth. It's also worth remembering that in late April, protesters blocked a government-commissioned coach which was used to try to move 22 people who'd been living in Margate for 7 months. We later found out that 15 of the 22 people had actually received letters from the Home Office saying that they would no longer be moved, but it didn't stop this operation taking place. So all around the UK, we're seeing members of the public deciding to engage and challenge this dehumanizing and often illegal, if not immoral, uh, kind of like anti-immigrant witch hunt, which is dragging people out of their homes and trying to set them up for deportation to places like Rwanda, or in holding cells like the Bibi Stockholm. We're talking about asylum seekers. We're talking about migrants who've done nothing wrong, not committed any crime. And the final story for this section is that of the duty solicitor Delhi Johnson, and he was pinned down by security staff at Stratford. He told him he couldn't breathe. It didn't make a difference, and this was, after he explained that, he had attended the court. He was a duty solicitor. He went out for a cigarette smoke. They wanted to search him. He let them search him. Then they told him to take off his shoes. He said, "Look, come off it, man. You just seen me here 10 seconds ago." He refused to take off his shoes, and that's when 4 or 5 of the security pinned him down with their knees and ignored the fact that he couldn't breathe. It was an awful situation, I don't know what to say. I mean, those of us who think that our occupations, our roles protect us from this kind of violence, you're wrong. It's one of the things I see in the university. Many of the security that are kind of like searching protesters or searching students and staff members. When I go to university now, I have security if I want to go to certain buildings. They are also from the same ethnic community as myself in many cases. So we have to be mindful of this kind of thinking and this kind of behavior. I'm going to move on. Just as a reminder, you are watching the Galleys Pan-African Community News Update. If you're watching live, you're welcome to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Please, Sister Oleander is on the line, so you can send a message or tweet or question or anything. Again, if you're sharing it through Facebook, I didn't get to share it on my personal account for some reason. So please feel free to share it. And we're trying to work out which one works better. So if you can, that'd be really helpful to us. And of course, if you like the broadcast or think it's useful, you can hit the like, you can subscribe it, or share it with other people in other spaces. But I'm now going to go through the system which we call Politrix. And and I'm going to start off with kind of like Politrix exemplar. I mean, this is taking it to a limit. Can't make this stuff up. Many people are challenging Keir Starmer after he accepted Natalie Elphicke, who's a right-wing Tory. She's defected from the right and moved to Labour, and she's now part of the Labour Party. And the reason why it's exacerbated is because our MP Diane Abbott continues to be suspended from the Labour Party for over a year now for some comments that she made in the Observer, which she apologised for immediately. So she isn't a Labour MP because of what's been removed from her, but this woman, this controversial right-wing Conservative who has continuously attacked the Labour Party over its policies on immigration, who in 2020 attacked the footballer Marcus Rashford over his free schools meals plan. She's now welcome with both arms. I mean, in fact, even today, the Tories leaked something. I think they call it briefing. They briefed the media with some dirt on her, and now the Labour Party is defending Elphicke. They're actually out there defending her. She was 10 minutes ago a Conservative member. Now they're defending someone who attacked them, and all the while, Diane Abbott is still suspended a year later after she made a comment and she apologised for it. B, the Tories' major funder, Hester, what's his name, Frank Hester, called for her to be shot. and said that she makes him hate all African women. That's just died down, right? There's no commentary on this now. There's no comments from either Labour or Conservatives on this. They've just buried that story. And something that Diane said that's very true on a particular issue. She says that the position of the current leadership of the Labour Party is disappointing. She points out that he seemed equally reluctant at the outset to call out either racism or sexism, and instead, the entire focus when it comes to Hester was in demanding that the Tories give his money back, which was not the primary point of that case. We just had to keep our eye on it. Can't make this stuff up. The next story is one of a first in many ways. It's the racist abuse faced by our sister Lillian Sinori Barr. Now, she was selected to be the first mayor of Derry and Stephen, I think that's how you pronounce it. And on that selection, she's now received death threats. Now, I say death threats, racist death threats. The police have arrested a 30-year-old man in relation to these online threats, and they're treating it as a racially motivated hate crime. But Lillian has just said, look, since I put myself forward to represent my community, since I came to this country, I've been experiencing racism. But obviously, it's beyond what I had been experiencing. The death threats have been extremely hurtful to my family, to myself, but I'm more focused on the positives. And she's keeping that energy going. She says she's had enormous support from across the island, and she's going to continue pushing forward. And I big her up for that. Now, our sister was born in Kenya from the Maasai people. She credits her political success to her upbringing and describes her parents as inspirational. She arrived in Northern Ireland in 2010 as a refugee at the age of 28, and her achievement now being the first mayor is actually really amazing, and we want to big her up and support her. Those of you who say institutional racism and racism, Afrophobia doesn't exist in this country, you're living in cuckoo land, but we will still rise above it all. Okay, the next story is that of Kate Asamoah. Now, this is our sister Labour MP who had the whip restored to her after an investigation into her comments on the Gaza genocide during Holocaust Day, or the eve of Holocaust Memorial Day. Now, all she did say was that Gaza should be remembered as a genocide. Let's be clear. That's what she did say. And, she said that there was an international duty to remember the victims of the Holocaust, as well as more recent genocides in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia, and now Gaza. And it was that comment that had her suspended. The whip has been restored. I hate that term, the whip. Always does my head in. The whip has been restored, so now she is a Labour MP again. But, it has been asked by a senior member of that party, why have they, that's our sister Kate and Diane, suffered worse treatment than their European male counterparts? And that's a good question. Why has the Labour Party decided that actually we're going to treat them worse than someone of a different ethnic group? I think we know the answer why, but well done to the sister. Being part of that party, I don't know if that's actually a damning praise or not, but at least you can continue doing what it is and speaking up for those from your platform, which we appreciate. And just to put this into contrast, I want you to think about this next story, which I really don't have much information on. I'll thank our researchers for sharing with us. And this is a story about an independent councillor named Ken Robson. And he was reported to Durham County Council after sharing this shockingly racist meme, that's the words of a politician, not myself, on Facebook in April. Now, I've tried to find this meme, find out what he said. I can't find it. And I don't know what he said. It's all hush hush. But he's come out and apologized for his actions. And do you know what the actions against him were, what the sanctions were? He was ordered to undertake education and diversity training. That's it. Education and diversity training. Now, I don't know what he shared. I don't know what he said. I can't answer that. But I think we can see something strange is happening when it comes to politicians who are from minority ethnic backgrounds, especially if they speak out on violence against innocent people in places like Gaza. And also the difference with those who speak out and make racist comments, possibly about immigration, possibly about African people and linking us to criminality. I don't know. Very strange, right? I say strange. Those of you watching probably know it's not. I'm going to move on. And the final story for this week is it seems like a theme. It's quite embarrassing, actually. You can see an image, the shadow Foreign Secretary David Lammy, and above him you can see the grandson of the anti-apartheid icon, our beloved and elder and ancestor now, Nelson Mandela. And I can't believe I'm having to say this. Let me give you context. David Lammy went to a meeting of Republicans in Washington recently. Yeah, Republicans, not Democrats. And he said that the late South African president would not have agreed with the Gaza process at campuses across the US. This is what Lammy said. Now, this is actually complete nonsense. And Zwelithili, I hope I pronounce his name, Mandela, said that actually you should take his name out of your mouth. Because if we want to respect Nelson Mandela, then we should recall his dedication to all the heroes and heroines in the country and the rest of the world who sacrificed in many ways and surrendered their lives so Africans in South Africa could be free. He then, and I'm talking about Mandela, Nelson Mandela, dedicated, his words, saying, he then dedicated the anniversary that he was speaking in to the students protesting in US university campuses, because that was the time when they were pushing against anti-apartheid. In fact, Mandela actually came to the UK and supported and thanked those who protested against apartheid in the UK also. And he makes this very famous statement, which you probably heard in 1995, Nelson Mandela, when he says, "Our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinian people." So it's quite embarrassing, that the great-grandson, or the grandson of Nelson Mandela, not great-grandson, the grandson of Nelson Mandela, should have to come out and make a statement. I don't think he's the only one who's actually made a statement against David Lammy on this. A lot of people in South Africa have been insulted and infuriated by the comments of David Lammy. Not a good start for a shadow foreign secretary to go around the world taking people's role models and using them for political gain. In fact, I saw a clip of Lammy in Washington talking about being, if he is elected or not elected, if Labour is elected in the next general election, that he will be the first African, he doesn't use that word, African, directly with heritage from transatlantic slavery. So that's how he sees his heritage, as transatlantic slavery, not as an African who was enslaved, but he sees his legacy that way. And he uses that to kind of like curry favor with African Americans who don't really know who he is, are unaware of his politics. It's worth remembering that in the US, the protests for Palestine have been met with force by the police. The President Biden has actually authorized the police and condemned the protests, and over 2,000 people have been arrested. They're working, the police, with far-right extremists in actually trying to undermine the student protests, and they're non-violent protests. They've got encampments on university campuses. They're not harming anyone. They're just highlighting the fact that they want this BDS strategy, boycott, divestment, sanctions to be taken against anyone involved in supporting the murder of innocent people in Palestine, anyone involved in propping up the Israeli government's military action, killing innocent people. I'll leave it there. David Lammy seems to have a spot every week where he's also, they call it foot in mouth disease, where he just says something that just irritates people, not just in the UK now, but he's becoming an international clown. Okay, You are watching the Galley's Pan-African Community News Update. If you're watching live, you're welcome to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Give me one sec. Now, I'm in the studio with Sister Oleander, so please don't feel frightened. You're welcome to put a chat in, a message, a question, anything you want to talk about, anything that you want to respond to. Let us know that you can hear us okay. You're pretty quiet today, which is quite strange. I'm assuming that you can see us okay. Part of it is because some of you come on Facebook, so you might not be aware that we're on live. If those of you who are on Facebook are aware that we're on live, please don't, please feel free to share it with other members in Facebook. We'll try and rectify that for the next broadcast. But I'm going to continue on. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, blah, 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 blah. Sister Oleander.
Yes. Reparation Nation sends greetings and then goes on to say, yes, everything is okay.
Greetings and thank you. Thank you for letting us know that you're there. Okay, so it's just a silent day, or everyone's out enjoying the sun while we're doing this madness here. I say madness. This is the work, right? This is our contribution, the Galley's contribution to our struggle. Anyway, let me move on. The next section is going to be looking at Afrophobia and white supremacy. And I'm going to start off with a theme that we keep coming up with continuously over and over and over and over again. And that is our cultural artifacts being sold, commodified in a way that not only dehumanizes us and tries to turn us into property again. I say tries to, but does, but also exposes the level of institutionalized racism and Afrophobia that still remains in the UK and is enshrined in law. So in this particular case, a UK auction house has been criticised for selling African human remains to the highest bidder. Yes, you heard me right. So Smelly Auctioners, which is based in Dorset, was advertising ancient Egyptian skulls for an estimated 300 quid each. And they thought that they could get away with this. Well, thankfully, people saw what was going on, and there was an outrage. Much of it followed a great article by a journalist, Nadine White, and they've removed the skulls from sale. If those of you who are wondering, how on earth did they get these skulls? Well, they were unearthed in Egypt in 1881 by General Pitt Rivers, a colonialist. You may know him from the Pitt Rivers Museum in Oxford. He's someone who's often referred to as the father of British archaeology. And, they just decided that they wanted to make a bit of corn, a bit of cash on it. Didn't care about the racism. If it wasn't covered, if we weren't aware of the story, then they would have just sold them like they usually do. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Pitt Rivers, I should say that his theories and practices represented a transition from the racialization used by early anthropologists and the pseudoscientists, the science that unfortunately the discipline kind of like invented and is still in play today, towards the eugenics movement of the early 20th century, which led to dehumanization, quantification, and attempted sterilization of many ethnic groups, which also includes Africans, Jewish people, disabled people in the LGBT community. This is an outrageous movement, and it's a shame that this legacy just won't die without people trying to profit off it. Piece of good news, perhaps I should have kept this into the last section. Now, those of you who've been watching what's been going on in the university sector quite closely will know that Goldsmiths University is struggling right now. There's around 130 jobs at risk of being cut across 11 departments. But what we have found out is that its Black British Literature course is actually going to be kept. I was going to say saved. It is saved, but I say it's going to be kept. Now, I say kept as opposed to saved because Goldsmith actually announced that it was one of the courses that was going to go. And when that story broke in many papers, there was a outcry from many authors, academics, students, or former students, alumni who'd actually taken the course, saying, "Look, this is outrageous. You're just eradicating our history. You're just taking alongside what happened to Professor Hakeem Addy's course in Chichester. There is this savage attack on anything to do with our history and ancestry." But what's happened is that they've changed their mind. They've come back and said that actually they're not going to scrap this one. There's no guarantee, and this is why I won't say saved. There's no guarantee that this decision will stay in place beyond 2026, from what I'm hearing. So I don't want to say it's been saved. I'll just say they've decided just to reverse the decision. But it is good news, and the legendary book publisher Margaret Busby said it's a welcome reprieve. I think that's the right word. And she said the Goldsmith Black British Literature MA and the stalwart work of its co-conveners deserves to be further supported and fully celebrated. And coming from Margaret, that's praise indeed. So we had to keep our eye on this. The next story, I should say with the other story as well, is like there's also a Black History Masters program at Goldsmith, and we had to hope that that doesn't come under attack as well. It doesn't seem like it's going to be under attack, but we have to keep pressure on those institutions or they'll axe them in the quiet of the day. But I just want to feed up and continue on another story, and this is the story of the skull of the Congolese leader Lusinga Iwa Ngombe. And he is a freedom fighter who fought back against Belgian colonial invaders in the late 19th century. And he's now ended up in a box at the Institute for National Science in Brussels. And this is alongside another 500 human remains taken from former regions colonized by the Belgians. Now, just a disclaimer here as well, just up front. Now, this ancestor, from what I can tell, but I haven't done deep research on this, it looks like he was involved in enslavement on the wrong side. Like I said, I just done some cursory research on this. I haven't had a chance to go in depth, and that makes me feel sick. I'm going to be honest about it, but that's not the point of the story. The point of the story is that his skull is in the box along 500 skulls, African skulls, in this university or this museum. And like I said, it throws me a little bit. One of the things we do know is that our ancestor was such a thorn in the side of the Belgians that they commanded the entire region of troops to kill him. And they said that his head would eventually end up in Brussels with a little label, and that's exactly what happened. Now, his great-grandfather, or great-grandchild, and this is correct, it is his great-grandchild, because I know I said with Mandela it was a great-grandchild, it's grandchild. His great-grandchild, Vieira Lusinga, has written 2 letters to Philippe, the King of Belgium, asking for his ancestors' remains, but he has not had a response. So it's an interesting story, and it just really highlights how complicated this is when we're talking about ethics and morality, etc. So we had the story of an ancestor who was involved, from what it looks like, I don't want to besmirch his name, but he may have been involved in the enslavement of innocent African people, which means I don't have any sympathy for him, if I'm going to be really honest about that. But his head was caught by colonizing Belgian troops and taken alongside with 500 other Africans. I don't know much about them. And, the great-grandson wants the skull back, he wants his remains so he can bury it, which I do believe in. There's a right to do that, as much as I might not like particular history of that ancestor. And we're not seeing any progress on this. Oof, that's a complicated story. I'm going to leave that one there. Sister Oleander.
Yes, so we have a comment from Del Smith saying, "These people are wicked. They are obsessed with our human remains. I wonder how many skulls are in the British Museum."
Thank you, Sister Del Smith. You're right. It is pure wickedness. The British Museum actually has a store, so which is under the museum. So this is a really strange thing, and in other locations around the museum. So what happens that what we see in the museum itself is but a fraction of its collection. When I say a tiny,
Yeah.
tiny fraction of its collection, so you have loads of artifacts which have been looted. Some of it's been donated, but a lot of it's been looted and taken, and they just hoard it, they just keep it. And part of the reason that many will argue, and I'm sympathetic to this, is that they also use these for rituals. They have their little ways of or intention of using the ancestral artifacts of many different people around the world to maintain their power. There are some wicked people on this planet. They're evil people, and they and just because we hear a lot of people talking in political terms, in academic terms, doesn't mean that they don't have a spiritual or religious dimension to them. And so I think we spoke a couple of programs back about how one of the museums was holding on to the Ethiopian artifacts, which were used for rituals to uplift the quality of life and the spiritual life of the Africans in Ethiopia, and they refused to give them back. There's a lot of stuff going on here, and I don't know. Well, I don't know why they're obsessed, but clearly, like I said, there are other reasons other than just they have a desire to conserve the past, to preserve knowledge for the betterment of all humanity. This is a load of nonsense. That's not the reason they do it for. I'm going to move on, and this is the story about the Portuguese government, and this is a contradiction again. And this is probably why I love doing this program, because as a Pan-Africanist, it's very easy to say bomb Babylon and pretend that every single European on the planet is evil. That's not the case. That's not true. In this particular story, the president of Portugal, Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa, said that the country must take full responsibility for the wrongs of the past and the country's crimes, including colonial massacres. And he recognized that it had costs, and he asks, what are these costs? What are these actions that were not punished? And what were the artifacts that were looted and not returned? Let's see how we can repair this. This is the president of Portugal. He said that reparations could be made by cancelling the debts of former colonies, and introducing credit lines or financial packages or special cooperation programs. So that, so we have head of state making these comments, but you see the people that are still wicked, because the government, not the president, the government has said this guy's a traitor. What's he talking about? And they just dismissed his suggestions. They said that why should we pay the costs? We've got no plans to deal with reparations. And we should be focusing on deepening international cooperation. Why don't we just have better trade deals with them? Why don't we have, and this is the phrase that makes me sick, why don't we have more cooperation based on the reconciliation of brotherly peoples? This is their actual words. Now, campaigners have long appealed to Portugal to address its legacy of enslavement, because it's got the longest historical involvement in the enslavement of our people. We know about the wickedness of the British. We know how they industrialized it. We know how they profited from it. Forget what that idiot Kemi Badenoch says. But the Portuguese were the first in the 15th and 19th century. They're the first who did the incursions on our soil. And them alone, at least 6 million African people were kidnapped and forcibly transported across the Atlantic. And they were transported not on British vessels, not on French vessels, but Portuguese vessels. And most of those who survived the voyage, because remember, a lot of us didn't make it. A lot of us kind of like lost our lives or took our lives. We had rebellions on those ships. Those who survived were forced to work on the forced labor camps in the Americas, mostly in Brazil, while Portugal and many of its institutions today continue to profit from their labor. So, like I said, it's a complex history. It's worth remembering also, maybe I should have put this in remember, that on the 10th of May in 1902, Portugal was brought to close to bankruptcy by the costly revolution and revolt that took place in Angola. So I've put the image of Zumbi de Palomares, and you may know his famous history. There's an amazing film, Zombie, and there's the Quilimbos that was organized by him and others of that movement. But we also mustn't forget that past enslavement, the colonization of nations like Angola, where you had Amilcar Cabral fighting back. Portugal has a long history in the Ma'afa, a long negative history in the Ma'afa. And the fact that the president is making this statement and the government itself is pushing back, this is where we are. Okay, and the last story for this section is just a reminder that there is a massive rise in Afrophobia taking place across the world, and in particular, African refugees and migrants who are fleeing away from war, conflict, and corrupt governments, we're going to be honest about it, are ending up trapped in Tunisia, those on the continent, and they're unable to move on. So they can't make it to Europe, but they can't even return home. And what we're now seeing that's being underreported is a pure wickedness of the Tunisian authorities, who are in the early hours in the morning. I think they just did it last Friday. They're expelling hundreds of asylum seekers, hundreds of migrants and refugees from encampments. You see the image in the capital of Tunis, but they're going around and just destroying encampments, kind of like what the US police and the far-right extremists are doing in partnership to the student encampments against the genocide in Palestine. So last week, the Tunisian authorities forcibly removed over 500 displaced people, leaving some stranded near the border with Algeria. And I've included a map for you to see what's happening, the migration path, where people are moving. And of course, I get it. I get how the people of Tunisia might be frightened to see Africans migrating there. They might think that they've got no role to help migrants, but they do, right? We always hear about everyone being an African. Well, that means we have a level of solidarity when other human beings are running from war and conflict and violence. That's a lot of that section. Oh, Sister Oleander.
Yeah. So I have two comments. One from Mr. The Full 3. I have a friend of mine in Portugal who's very disgusted by the decision made by the centre-right coalition.
No, thank you, The Full, for letting us know and sharing that with us. And yeah, I mean, centre-right is the same thing that we're going to have in the UK. Well, we have that in the UK. The Labour Party and the Conservative Party are the same. They claim to be centre, but they're centre-right. So that what's happening in Portugal gives us a flavour of what's coming to the UK, or what's already here in the UK, but not in a formal state. You said there was another.
Yeah. So from Reparation Nation, an international sovereign central black African entity /bank/state must be constructed to demand, receive, and process reparations for Black Africa and the Black African diaspora.
Well, I would hope so. I mean, the whole idea about the African Union was that it was supposed to be that. But of course, what happened, I say the African Union was supposed to be that. No, maybe I should be more accurate. The Organization of African Unity, the OAU, that was supposed to be that. The corrupt, bastardized version of the African Union is not that. And so the original version would have been exactly what you just mentioned, and thank you for that, Reparations Nation. That was an anti-colonial movement that was born out of anti-colonialism. The AU was born out of trying to work with the colonizers, and it was basically neo-colonialism, turbocharged. And so we do have a problem with the fact that we don't have institutional that can follow through on what you aspire and what you kind of like articulated there. Doesn't mean that it's not coming. We're seeing movements across Africa where in different regions, nations are coming together with a pure anti-colonial approach. But still, I'm just seeing too many people suffering. The people, they're the ones who are suffering. They're the ones that I care most about, not so much the leadership.
Okay.
But I'm going to leave it there.
So sorry, one more comment. It's just learn to Two Pits says one love.
One love to you, and thank you. Loved it. I still love that. Okay, so if you're watching live, you are with me, brother Dr. Toyin Agbetu. This is Oleander, and this is Legality's Pan-African Community News Update. We're halfway through the program. I'm trying to whiz through things as quickly as I can because it's a long program. You're welcome to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, just like some others have just done, and we really do appreciate that. And of course, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share if you find this broadcast useful. If you're on Facebook, also don't forget to share with other spaces on that. We had some technical issues, so we're not going out to as many people as usual. But if you can't watch us live, there's a recording for you to catch up. Yeah, and that's it. Now we're going to go through some of the policing related issues affecting our community around the UK. My voice is starting to go. I'm going to get a sip of water. Okay, so this is a, hold on one second. This is a story about a report that reveals that rap and drill music has been used as prosecution evidence for serious charges, including alleged gang-related murders in cases covering over 252 defendants in England and Wales. Now, we touched upon this in an earlier program, but again, this is more development on this, and this has come from researchers at the University of Manchester, and they've found that 68 cases involving rap evidence said that the issue need urgent scrutiny, as there's no meaningful regulation nor even monitoring of how the criminal justice system uses rap as criminal evidence. And of course, I say of course, and this habit is also applied to people who have been charged with the controversial Jenga or joint enterprise, not Jenga. Jenga is the campaign group against it. The joint enterprise doctrine, which sees people, innocent people, being jailed for associations with those convicted of crimes. Now, this report, Compound Injustice, which you can find online, said that 84% of defendants were from minority ethnic communities, with almost 80% of them having African heritage. Furthermore, 53% were joint enterprise prosecutions. And the findings echo, kind of like the results and the statements coming from the campaign group Art Not Evidence, which was created in 2022 by a group of lawyers, academics, and music industry professionals who want to constrain the use of police officers as rap experts to interpret evidence against a defendant. This is, again, a very bizarre state of affairs where we're having comments that are used in rap music and drill music being used as evidence to prosecute young Africans. I'm not even a fan of the kind of content of the tracks and the music that people are talking about, but I am a fan of art and of music and people expressing themselves. And the danger with this kind of approach that is completely unregulated is actually seeing over 250 people charged, especially those with African heritage. It's very dangerous. That's all I can say. And it does bring back the days of I'm a nerd, as you know, and I love my video games, and it brings back the days of when people started to say that video games would make people go out and murder people. These kind of stupid arguments. They don't, because that comes back on the thing like, well, if video games can make people murder people, then what about films making people murder people? What about TV programs making people murder? What about literature? What about books making people murder people? So this decision to focus on rap and drill music is clearly Afrophobic as far as I'm concerned. And the fact that there is no regulation, there is no protocol about how this is being used. I understand if someone's name checking, it's back and forth, like the so-called beef that's taking place in the entertainment world right now. Is it Drake and so I don't know, whatever the clowns are doing this week. Yeah. If it's explicit like that, then I have a little sympathy that it's something to recognize that there's existing relationships between people, but to convict someone, no. Let me move on, because it's a serious issue but a nonsensical state of affairs. Sister Oleander.
Yes, I have a comment from Anthony McCall at the galley. I'm going to try and say this correctly. Abibi Fahodi Abibi Tumi. So I don't know what that means. And then there's another comment from him saying, special big up to Sasha Johnson on this Mother's Day. 3 hearts.
No, well, give thanks. I can only assume that you were uttering some words in you. It didn't sound like Yoruba, if I'm being honest. But thank you and big up, Mother
Yeah.
Johnson as well. Let me move on. Now, this is a section on policing, and one of the ugly truths that we have to recognise is that we have bad ones in our community as well. So this is a story of a former Metropolitan Police officer who has received a minimum jail sentence of more than 13 years after being convicted of 10 counts of rape, including 3 of raping a child under the age of 13. Now, the man you can see on the screen, Cliff Mitchell, was described as the devil and a pathetic excuse of a man by his 2 victims. He's 24-year-old. Like I said, he was found guilty of these 10 counts. He was also in breach of a non-molestation order. He was charged with 1 count of kidnapping. He was eventually sacked by the Metropolitan Police Force in 2023. This is a bit distressing. I'll just say it now. During his trial, the court heard how he had kidnapped and raped one of his 2 victims while armed with a knife. This happened in September 2023. Telling her to put her arms behind her back before tying her up with cable ties and putting tape over her mouth. The jury was told he laughed at her as she cried and told her she was I'm not going to use the word he said, it begins with S, and that no one would believe her if she said anything because he was a police officer. So this, I'm not even going to use the word man. So this character, Cliff Mitchell, frankly has been found guilty. He was a serving police officer. And it does make you think about who are they attracting? What is their recruitment process? What is their vetting process? The police failure to protect women and girls, violence against women and girls, to perpetrate, because we have seen officer after officer who's perpetrating violence against girls and doing it with impunity because they're police officers is quite scary. It doesn't matter that in this particular case that it's someone with African heritage. Well, it does for us because it says questions about, where did this come from? Did anyone hide him, or did anyone? I don't know. I don't even know how to deal with this kind of situation. Anyway, it's the news. I'm sharing it. I'm going to move on because it makes me sick to my stomach. Sister Oleander.
Yeah, so Anthony McFall says those words are Akan Twi words meaning black liberation.
I share. Excellent. Okay. And I love it. It's Pan-Africanism. So it doesn't have to be Yoruba. It's Twi. Let me take that mark off this screen and move on. Okay. Let's continue. And thank you, Anthony. I needed some words to kind of like refocus me. And so there's a new figures that just been out published that reveal that tribunals for racial discrimination within the Met has soared by 110% in a year. Now, senior police officers are warning that racism is actually getting worse within the Met, which is Britain's biggest police force, if you didn't know. Yeah, we don't have much more on this. I know there's comments by our brother Leroy Logan from Andy, who's head of the Metropolitan Police Association. And Leroy was the founder of the National Black Police Association. And Leroy actually says, he goes as far as says that the figures remind him of a pre-Macpherson era Met. So, we're talking about, we often on this program talk about what happens to people from our community by police officers outside, people, by police officers on the streets. But what we sometimes forget is that those of us who try to work inside the Met are also faced by institutionalized racism, and that hasn't gone away yet. Andy George, sorry, I had a mind fog just there. The next story and the final story to do with policing is that of the case of our sister Robin Williams. And those of you who remember, she was a highly decorated former Metropolitan Police officer. She was convicted of possessing child abuse video. It seems like the case was completely manufactured. From what I remember, the story was someone shared it in a WhatsApp group that she was a part of. She didn't delete it. They wanted her to see it to know what to do about it. But because she had it on her phone, it was technically she had possessed child abuse. And so she resigned from the Met with immediate effect. After the conviction, I think it was an awful situation for her. No one really believes that she's involved in child rape or promotion of that kind of material. But you see, this particular story is a development from that. You see, because after that, she was placed on a list where she had to comply with sex offender notifications requirements, and she just refused. I mean, well, I shouldn't say she refused. She just repeatedly failed to do so. It just, it was stressing her out. And so on the day she was due to go to trial, thankfully, the prosecutor said that the court, that the case would be dropped. They said it's not in the public interest to continue with the case. They know that, she had a recent psychiatric report done on her well-being, and the ongoing effect of the court proceedings was very traumatic. And so the case was dropped. I don't know if she's still having to kind of like comply with her sex offender notification requirements. But like I just said, we talk about institutionalized racism. We talk about the way the police impact on people outside, outside the Met, in our communities. But those of us who are inside the Met, and even those who are former members of the Met, are still harassed by a system that is institutionally racist and uses Afrophobic techniques continuously. This is a rare case of compassion, and I commend those involved in dropping this against her. That's the last story for this section. You are watching the Galleys Pan-African Community News Update. If you're with us live, you're welcome to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. If you're on Facebook, please feel free to share with other people, because we don't have the same reach today. Don't forget to subscribe, like, if you find it useful. And this section is going to look at some of the health-related stories relating to our community over the past couple of weeks. So I'm going to start with some good news. And I just realized I should have put this in the good news section, but it's health. Does this go in the good news section on health? I had to figure that one out afterwards. Okay, so you may have heard or be aware that the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, we call them NICE, has recommended its first sickle cell treatment for routine use on the NHS. When I say its first sickle cell treatment, I'm talking about its first treatment of this nature, prolonged for routine use on the NHS. Now, John James, who's the CEO at the Sickle Cell Society, has said that users of Flexator, which is this treatment, have shared remarkable stories of improved quality of life, reduced pain, and substantial increases in energy levels, allowing people to work, connect with families and friends, and improve their physical and mental health, generally achieve a quality of living that the rest of us take for granted. I'm not going to go through all the details of how it works and what it is. It just let you know that it is another therapy, it's another treatment. For those who are eligible for it, those who can take it, and and the toxicity of it is manageable. These are medications and therapies that can help manage the conditions of sickle cell and reduce the pain and crisis. There was a previous medication that you might have heard of us talk about. I'm going to try and pronounce it, but I never get it right. Crisanlibumab, something like that. Crisanlibumab. It sounds like word salad. But that was revoked in January following internal review by regulators. I think they weren't happy with the amount of peer-reviewed or case studies. They needed more peer review to say that it was safe. Often these kind of medications, the thing that hinders them being used and able to be prescribed for routine use on the NHS is also a financial issue. Often what tends to happen is that they come at a cost because they're quite unique and quite new, innovative medications, and those at NICE and those at the NHS just don't think it's worth the cost. But that's not the case in this, so we'll see what happens with this one. So it's just good news. Voxelotor, I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, I'll leave it there. I know Sister Oleander went to a sickle cell conference recently. I don't know if they talked about that, but maybe we can chat on that later. Okay, the next story is one that's a development of one that we've been talking about since last year, maybe the year before that. We talked about the likelihoods of African women and to pass away during childbirth. But there's a development because there's new research that shows that women of African heritage are over twice as likely to be admitted to hospital with perinatal mental illnesses than their European counterparts. And this comes after analysis of NHS England figures, which highlights that there are structural inequalities and cultural attitudes to mental health when it comes to African women. Several factors contribute to the ethnic disparities, including women from minority communities on average being worse off economically, having difficulties accessing services, and like I said, just different cultural attitudes towards mental illness, meaning that we are always perceived, I'm talking about African women here, as strong and kind of like always able to cope with everything, so never in need of support when that's not the case. So this is something else that's just recently been announced, and it's something that needs to be watched out. And this report has come from Dr. Katie Marrick, who's a senior clinical research fellow and honorary consultant psychiatrist with NHS Lothian. The next story is one which is an ongoing theme. Those of you who know, the Legality Organization made a film called Beauty Is some years ago, talking about looking at beauty from an African or Pan-African perspective. And the reason why we did this was to address issues like this. And this is where you might have know, if you can look at the images of skin bleaching or skin whitening products. What happened is that there was a South London resident called Musulu Olatunji Badejo, a 56-year-old, who pled guilty to selling banned skin lightening products. I say lightening, it's bleaching, whitening, whatever you call it, following a 4-year investigation by Suffolk Council's Trading Standards team. Now, these products are very dangerous. They often contain carcinogenic materials that are illegal, and that can cause problems when they leak into the bloodstreams. So they're not supposed to be used, not supposed to be sold. But he had managed to sell more than 20,000 products which have been imported from Ghana, Nigeria, and Thailand to his London home, and this earned him over £340,000. That's right, over £250,000. So they seized around 1,700 products from his home, and I say products, they were toxic products. They got a warrant and they went into his home when he was out of the country. They had detected that he was on eBay and he had 2 different accounts. And so what they did is that they made 7 test purchases, carried out tests, and in those tests they found that 5 of the items contained either hydroquinone or corticosteroids, which are both banned and dangerous chemicals. So he's pleaded guilty, which is good. We'll see what happens. Now the problem with this is that they're often fined, people who engage in this. He's made £250,000 by poisoning people in our community. That's how I see it. And playing on kind of like weaknesses about kind of like the ideas of whiteness as beauty. If he's just fined, then he will be able to pay that fine and continue doing what he does. I'm hoping, I don't normally say these kind of things, but I'm hoping anyone engaged in these kind of criminal activities where they're placing people's health at risk just to profit, receive a custodial sentence. But I don't know what's going to happen with this one. He will go off the scene for 5 minutes and someone else will pop up doing the same thing. The solution to this is always going to be cultural rather than, punitive and through the law. It's about encouraging young people, encouraging, us as a community to love ourselves, to love how we look, to love who we are, to love our natural skin tone, and not to aspire to beauty standards which are not for us. I mean, we are who we are, right? Everyone's beauty in their own way. We see beauty in everyone's way. We should not be trying to be something that we're not. Anyway, I'll leave that story there. I just want you to know he sold over 20,000 products in 4 years and earned £250,000 by exploiting our insecurities about beauty. And the final story for this section, and this is the penultimate section before we close up and go into the being positive section, is that of our young queen, Tia Gordon, 11-year-old princess who, well, what can I say? It says on there, she had a brain tumor and it was misdiagnosed for 3 years. Now, her mother, Imogen Darby, explained how she was assessed more than 30 times by doctors before she was told she had a brain tumor. In fact, in the few months before the diagnosis, she had taken her to the GP around 10 times. She'd called NHS 111 around 3 times. And when she was in A&E, she was told, "Oh, your daughter's got a stomach bug. Just leave her be, leave her to it. It will work itself out." But obviously it didn't. And, Tia first became ill in March 2020, but she was given painkillers. Yeah, that's what I said, painkillers for stomach bugs and migraines. And she had her glasses prescription changed 4 times. But if her mother hadn't kept on pursuing this, who knows what happened. I mean, it got really bad because, Tia started having problems walking. And it was only after that, when she went back to hospital, that she had an emergency CT scan, and it revealed a 3.5 centimeter tumor. So it's 1.4 inches. 3 years. Now, the good news is that she's undergoing physiotherapy. She's keen to get back to a normal life. And after surgery, there's at least 96% of the tumor had been removed. It was a benign tumor now, so it's gone. And hopefully she'll come back. But it's just, again, I've always said, I mean, I talk about sickle cell a lot for obvious reasons, but for all of us, when we have people in our family or people that we are carers for or care for who are undergoing illnesses, listen to them, trust them, do your own research. I'm not saying don't listen to doctors. I'm not saying don't listen to nurses and medical experts. I would never say something like that. But I'd say that you are also the expert of you. You are the expert of your babies. And it's a combination of your knowledge, your intimate knowledge of the circumstances, of the behaviors, of the changes in behavior of those that we care and love, and tying that with those who have expertise in the medical field, that we can find solutions, because this is outrageous. And this could have ended up with a tragic story if that tumor hadn't been exposed. In fact, she lost 3 years of her life if she was struggling to walk, if she was having serious migraines, that she can't get those years back. If her glasses prescription had been changed, she can't get those years back. So it's a good ending to the story. But yeah, it's a good lesson for us. Okay. Oh, did I say Sister Oleander there?
Yeah. So we have a comment from Reparation Nation. White supremacy is a complete international financial, political, and cultural ecosystem. Would you agree that only a new Black African religion will be able to generate enough power to counter it?
Okay, let me answer that question. I think you're right in the way that you bend to white supremacy. I think you miss out the fact it's also a spiritual movement. It's also got its pseudo-religious phase towards it as well. But a solution isn't a new African spiritual movement. The solution, if anything, would be a reenactment and a reinvesting in the existing traditional spiritual belief systems that exist in indigenous political systems, pre-colonialism. Many of them are still fit for purpose if they receive the required investment from our people globally. So I hear the point, and this is probably another program if we talk about our indoctrination into other belief systems. But I don't always believe that new is better. I think that what's happened is that if you think about things like Ifa, if you think about what they call Vodun, if you think about Kandobli, there are many spiritual belief systems that have helped us survive the onslaught of white supremacy. They are working. They just haven't yielded our higher quality of life, but they have worked when it comes to resistance. And sometimes they are abandoning them, which is what's happened, is what causes our problem. So great question, by the way. Thank you. Okay, you're watching the Getty's Pan-African Community News Update. This is a final section, so we've got a few more minutes left. So if you're watching live, remember you're welcome to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. It's the last opportunity, so don't waste any time. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share if you find this broadcast useful. I always like to say that. And now this closing section looks at a couple of the positive news stories related to our community over the past 2 weeks. And I'm going to start with the story of Norma Gregory. Now, throughout much of this program, I've been sharing some of the news about the attacks on our heritage, our history, our culture, with people trying to auction it off, sell it off, close down programs, teaching, educational programs. But the pushback comes from people like Norma Gregory, who's an author and historian who in 2013 set up a social enterprise to discover and preserve the history of Nottinghamshire's community of African heritage. And this is a really good thing to do. Now, she has been providing history and heritage content and services for museums and heritage art museums, as well as producing books, exhibitions, broadcast programs, content, and workshops. Now, she works hard to ensure that history is remembered and celebrated for generations to come. And this is the way that we move forward, is by not forgetting who we are, what we have achieved, not forgetting our mistakes, our errors. I share horrible stories like the I don't want to say man, the police officer in our community who raped those children and those women. I share those stories so we learn from them as well. And so this is a positive story. And I remember from last week or the last program when I did this, it's a good news section, and I've got to keep focus on the good news, or I'll make it into a bad news section. So we're talking about Norma today because last year she won the Women's Champion of the Year at the Social Enterprise Awards UK. So it's a good news story, and I'm going to keep on the good news tip because there's a lot of bad news coming in, and sometimes I get caught in it. The next good news story is one about Orleans Kitchen, and this is a lovely story about how in 2020, when COVID struck, our brother Leon, who you can see in the image, had been in the States working, but visited the UK to see his family in Cambridge. Now, he couldn't return to the US during lockdown, so he set his culinary skills to good use and started cooking at home and catering for his family and friends. Now, inspired by his mum, Orlean, who also loved cooking traditional Jamaican food, Leon decided to take up catering and cookery as a viable business model. And after a couple of years, they secured a spot at the New Look Guildhall in Cambridge Town Centre. And now, Orleans Kitchen is also offering catering services for private events. So it's a good story, right? Out of adversity, we're seeing us using our skills, our innovation to actually make a living, to find a way to actually still spread our culture. It's not just through books, it's also through food. Norma's work in the last slide uncovered a history of people, who arrived in the Windrush, who were part of the coal mining history in the UK that had not been exposed before. She shared that. And in this story, we're seeing 2 Africans with Caribbean heritage who have come together across the transatlantic journey and actually set up something that's actually still promoting our culture and providing employment to people in the region. So this is a good news story, and I thought it'd be lovely to share that. Sister Oleander.
Yes, so Reparation Nation has come back and says the existing and previous African spiritual systems are/were not strong enough to defend Black Africa from white supremacy. Why do you think that African spiritual systems will provide a solution now?
Okay, I mean, great question again. I'm still going to keep it in the positive vein. Actually, they were strong enough because we're here. We're still standing. We're still talking. Many community groups that came into contact with white supremacy are gone. There are none of them left. They were decimated. And this was you know, from the Amerindians, I'm an anthropologist and I don't want to go through a history lesson. What I'm going to say to you is that those spiritual systems, that belief, that creation of future, that belief in family, those values of a creator, you know, they kept us and sustained us. It doesn't mean that we weren't harmed. It doesn't mean that we haven't had struggles, but we are still standing, and we will continue to be here. We will continue to survive, but it is going to be a challenge, and that's the reason why I think that investing in what we have rather than always trying to invent something new, because every generation always has those amongst it who thinks that they are the ones, they are the chosen one. You're hearing this language from Israel, right? They are the chosen one. They are God's people, which gives them the right to kind of like cause abuses. But that's not the case. We are all the Creator's children. And you know what I mean? And so we sometimes have to have faith in that. I'll leave
Okay,
that there.
so there's
Great
one
question.
more comment from Anthony McFall. We as African people globally definitely have to rid ourselves of non-African ideologies and religions, including Islam and Christianity, which were imposed upon us.
Again, this, I think we might need to do a special program on this one, the spiritual belief system. It's a complicated situation because what's happened is part of our survival was learning how to, what would be the word without being offensive? How to customize, there we go, how to customize some of those alien belief systems and use them for our benefits. I'm not saying that we were completely successful. My father, as you may know, God, I'm going to sound like Keir Starmer. He wasn't a toolmaker. He was a Muslim. My mother was a Christian, and I'm the fusion of that. I'm an African traditionalist. I'm a spiritualist, and I'm going to say, like, if you saw the Africans, we spoke about Portugal, we spoke about their role in Ma'afa. If we think about the Africans who survived the Middle Passage, and you'll think about how they took Catholicism and actually Africanized it and used it in a way so they could still practice their spiritual belief systems and survive without being murdered by white supremacy. I'm not saying things in Brazil are perfect. Of course not. But I'm saying we're still standing and they found a way to do that. It's the same thing in different regions and different religions. It's like if you go to Senegal, for example, one of my favorite countries on the continent, you'll see that what happens is that the version of Islam that is there is infused with African spirituality, is infused with Africanness. And so what happens is that as much as I am not a Muslim, as much as I don't practice the Islamic doctrines, I do respect that every people have their own belief system, the spiritual belief system. And even though ideally I would be happy if everyone went to a traditional belief system, I think we had to recognize our family is broad enough, it's wide enough. 1 billion people are not all going to believe the same thing, to still work with others who, as long as they accept African core values, I think, you know what, Malcolm was the best person on this. Malcolm was the main one. Who people pray to is not really the issue. Malcolm was a Muslim, and that made no difference to his commitment to Pan-Africanism. And that's a really good example to listen to. You know, people don't like me saying this, but Marcus Garvey was a Christian. Okay, it made no difference to his commitment to African people. So it's more complicated than that. But those are really good comments, and I don't want to shut down the debate. It's just the time and the theme. I'm trying to stay positive in this section because I realize that the whole point of this new section, Positive Stories, was to keep it positive, and sometimes I get too political in it. Oh, thank you again. I'm going to move on to the next positive story, and this one brings a smile to my heart. For those of you who don't know, is Stormzy, the award-winning rapper, has launched a community centre in Croydon, and you know, he shouldn't have to be doing this, right? You know, he's a young man, he's an artist, you know, he should be living his life, having fun, you know, but he's using his own money to give back to the community centre. And this is what I love. This is what spirituality is. Okay, this is what the heart of spirituality is. It's like, you know, and so he set up this, it's called Murky FC HQ. It's a joint endeavor with Adidas, and it's going to host a football pitch, a recording studio. And I say it's going to, it does host a football pitches, a recording studio, and a sports gaming hub. And, you know, he made this comment about, when I was growing up, there was nothing like this around for young people. So it means a lot to him that he now has a facility like this in Croydon. It's proper homegrown. And this was done in the context that youth services in England have lost some 1.1 billion pounds between 2010 and 11 and 2020 21. Let me see if I can. Now, this was a first attempt on this. It's very difficult to do this on here. I
I always imagine I walk past someone in the street or someone reaches out and they're in their like 30s or 40s or however old they are, and they're looking fly. They got nice house, they got they got their family, they got their nice car, and then someone saying, "No, do you know what, that thing that you built years ago, or that thing that you done when I was a kid, actually, you know, that was really good for me, and now I'm here. That's all I want." It's no longer even about man. Do you know what I mean? I'm done. I'm finished. Like, I ain't recorded a record for 30 years. And give them a little spud, a little hug, and be on my way.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, sorry for the technical issue. It's difficult putting videos into this program for some reason. We're still working on that. I'm trying to get little animated clips and stuff like that. But I hope you heard that. And the point that he makes, which I really love, which is very important, is it's like, it's not for him. It's not, what he's doing. It's planting that seed and just hoping that sometime in the future it will pay back. It will help someone else. I mean, one of the things that I always think about is when I look at people like David Lammy and I think about their legacy, and I think, you don't know what you're doing. It's like you are aligning yourself with white supremacy. You're so up its arse, excuse the language, but you're so up it that you don't realize that just because whiteness is writing your history and whiteness will say that you was this and you was that, actually the real history that matters is this history. It's the grassroots history. It's us who are here right now. Those of you who are listening, the one or two of you who are online with us, who are thinking, yeah, I'm going to tell this to my child. I'm going to tell this to my spar. I'm going to spud someone else and say, yeah, you know what? I helped on each one, teach one. And spreading the message organically. That's what makes change. That's what builds revolution. That's what builds resilience. That builds strength. That builds character. It's like being written about in the papers, being on television. All those kind of things mean nothing. But listening to someone talking from their heart, listening to a poem that moves you, looking at a piece of art that encapsulates your dreams, reading a story, a novel, a play that comes from the heart, comes from the grassroots community, that's what's meaningful. That's when you read like a historical piece, or you read something from a historian and it's got those epic accounts, it's got those bits of detail. That's what makes it happen. The official narrative from the state means jack. Whether you are Lord this, Sir that, OB this, MBE, who cares about all that kind of nonsense? Okay, so Stormzy, props, and I had to give big respect for that. Anyway, let me move on. Oh, Sister Oleander.
Yes, so two comments. Anthony McFall says, yes, Brother Malcolm said, put your religion in the closet.
Yes, he did.
And he says, big up to Stormzy. Big up.
Yeah, definitely. And you're right. Malcolm said that. And what I loved about Malcolm was that he was such a genuine brother. He was such a wise brother. But we'll come back to that. But he was right about putting your religion in the closet. It's like, that's something else. That's something you do. That's between you and your creator. That's how you see things. I mean, there are times when, if it's in the public domain, it can cause conflict. But sometimes we don't need to know, right? We don't need to know. All I need to know is that when they're coming for us, are you by my side? Do you have my back? I don't care who you kneel down to or what you pray to. Are you there? That's what matters. Are you a ride or die person? And so religion, some of my best friends are Christians, some of my best friends are Muslims. I don't really particularly care. That's just how it runs. Let's move on. Last couple of slides. Okay, so a little bit biased. In fact, both of these slides, I think that come in next are a bit biased. So just as a heads up, that on Friday there's going to be an unveiling of a plaque for James Baldwin. And this has been organized by Black History Walks and Nubian Jack, two amazing organizations. There were two amazing brothers. It's going to take place outside CLR James Library at 10 a.m. So if you can make it, be there. I'm going to try and drop by. You might see me on my bike before I, kind of like pedal off somewhere else afterwards. It's just a reminder that James Baldwin visited the CLR James Day in 1985. You can see that in the image there, and it's like an anniversary. Baldwin was an amazing writer, amazing brother. It's really interesting because I had to just recently write something about him for his anniversary. I'm not sure it's going to be published because my piece is a little bit controversial. Baldwin was an activist par excellence, but when you read all his works, he was a very tortured activist, and so he loved us as a people, and his artistry is without there's no doubt about his brilliance. But there were times when he was contrary, and I think I've spoken in this program about the way he was roughed up by the Black Panthers, especially Elwood Cleavage in Soul on Ice. But some of it justified, some of it not. The homophobic part of it, certainly not. But he definitely, and this is what I said about it's us, how we remember, how we reflect, what we say, and what they mean to us, and we embrace James Baldwin, just like we embrace the Black Panther movement. So this is just an event that's taking place on Friday, the 17th of May, outside CLR James Library in Hackney. And sticking with the Hackney theme, and yes, I'm being completely biased, being an East Londoner. This is what I missed out last week, and I was going to talk about this. There's an exhibition of archival materials celebrating the work and legacy of the Hackney Community Defence Association and community resistance in borough, in general, across the borough. So I haven't unfortunately been able to make it to any of the events, and I'm going to try. I think they finish on the 24th of May. There's been various different events, and I've been gutted that I couldn't make it to them. But hopefully you can. You can take a picture of the slide. Most of them are taking place at Hackney Archives, Wednesdays to Fridays between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. and they're going to be open to the 24th of May. So you've still got a week and a bit to go. And alongside that, there's the last 6 weeks to see Hackney Museum's exhibition At Home in Hackney, and this is going to cover a whole load of families that were photographed in Hackney, dealing with activism from the 1970s to people involved in the current club scene. Now, the exhibition displays 5 decades of Hackney life through a camera lens, and that's going to be open until the 15th of June. So both of them are very interesting to check out. I'll go to the Hackney Archives first because that's going to finish, like I said, on the 24th of May, and then you'll have another month, 2 to 3 weeks to go to the Hackney Museum one. And I wanted to share this because I saw something about, there was recently an event in Hackney about gentrification in the borough, and I wasn't able to make that. This is one of the downsides of this work. I often can't make all the events I want to go to, and it was, like I said, it seemed like it was very well received, and we don't really know our history in the spaces that we live. And so, this is my way of saying to yourself, like, if you're in East London, check it out. There's I went to the exhibition in the British Library last week. Was it last week? This week. The one about music, and that was a very interesting exhibition as well. It had some really good stuff in there that was really enlightening. There were some omissions which really knocked me quite a bit, but overall it was a really good exhibition to check out as well. So yeah, I'll leave that there. And the final slide before we close up is well, I'm completely biased. Those of you who know me and have known me for a long time will know that I'm a Malcolm man, or I should say El Hajj Malik El Shabazz. He was formerly known as Omwale Malcolm X, now an ancestor. But this is a piece of great news as far as I'm concerned, that the Nebraska legislature, which is the internal government, passed a bill that it would honor the life and legacy of the famous Pan-Africanist every year. And I love this. Now, there's Senator McKinney, who was kind of like the spokesperson for this initiative, said that the establishment of a Malcolm X Day in Nebraska marks a significant milestone. It symbolizes the state's acknowledgement of the invaluable contributions and enduring legacy of its foremost advocate for human rights. Now, it is not a state holiday. That's the sad thing. It will be marked as a day for students to learn more about the human rights activists. That's how they see it. But this is really important. And this is kind of like goes to what I was just saying a few minutes ago about we write the history, because back in the day, Malcolm was seen as the most dangerous man alive in America. You had J. Edgar Hoover, you had all these kind of kind of like attacking Black Panther movements, and all the people around his era attacking him alongside Martin Luther King and of course Jimmy Baldwin. And so it's us, it's our looking at their works, us evaluating their works, continuously kind of reviewing, continuously bigging it up, continuously taking the lessons, continuing shrouding it in films, in songs, in poems. It's us that make Malcolm the role model that he is today. And the sellouts, the coconuts, the Oreos, the bounties, all of them, where are they? Who cares? We don't talk about them anymore. They're the ones that are part of the, so they might be taught in schools, in primary schools, when the students can't research their own topics and they can't push back. But the moment, you know, there's a level of consciousness, we kick them to the curb, and this is the real history. These are the teachings that we grow up and move on. So, I mean, I'd like to say that if Malcolm was here in person today, he would also advise us not to lose focus on the millions of people that are displaced and killed by the conflicts in Sudan, in the Congo and Haiti, as well as Palestine. He's that reminder that we can focus on what's around us and what's going on internationally at the same time. So this annual day, I think that perhaps we in the UK should commemorate this day every year as well. We don't need to wait for someone in government to say that we can celebrate Malcolm X on his birthday. Sister Oleander.
Yeah, so I have a comment from Anthony McCall. Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, and Dr. Amos Wilson, my ideological fathers.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
FP Coms says, greetings. I just wanted to say that I was listening to another podcast and your name and great work was mentioned, as well as the importance of the work of Legali. Just wanted to let you know.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot to me. I appreciate that. You know, having people who, you know, kind of like, and thank you, you know, Sister Nicola, thank you, both of you actually, acknowledging our works in that way is always helpful. It keeps us going. As you know, we're not paid for this. We're not, you know, this is not something that the state rewards me for. In fact, this is a threat to our livelihoods, just me saying some of the things I say in this program. But, you know, what's the point of life if we're not living it? I don't want to just exist, you know. So I'm a Pan-Africanist, and I'll be a Pan-Africanist until I join the ancestors. I will never join the ancestors as a member of the British Empire. So much appreciated. And with those lovely commentary, we're going to bring this program to a close. And as always, I just want to say thank you. And just remind you all that it's not just us who do this by ourselves. I mean, obviously having a wonderful Sister Oleander in the studio is a blessing for me, but we have Brother Colin for his research and others who send stories to us. And also, I think I want to start adding this to the end as well. Especially, you know, mentioning, our brother Anthony mentioning Amos Wilson. Sometimes I had to share news which is quite harrowing, and it can make us feel despondent. But I want to say, don't despair. A reparations nation, you know, the work that he's doing and what he's saying there, his points are very good points. Don't despair. If you want to help, if you want to change this thing, it's like, yes, you can create a new organization or plan, you know, to create a new organization and work towards that. But you can also join a Pan-Africanist organization. If you want to learn more, you can join a collective. You can even just read books or watch films or access conscious offline and online media. I recently did an event at the School of Pan-Africanism 4, and it was amazing. Just having a School of Pan-Africanism 4, it was, you know, it was an amazing debate. And I wish that was around when I was a young man to learn from. And don't forget that we also have many community journalists and presenters doing their best writing, presenting within the mainstream media. And it's a very difficult task they have. Melissa Sigodo, I spoke about last week, Nadine White, Sinead Fleury, you know, obviously, you know, people like Henry Bonsu, even those who are not African, like Sanjito on LBC, or who was on LBC. This work comes with threats and risks. You know, you speak up and you're censored and you're fired. So we have to support all those who take that risk. But ultimately, please remember that this is your program as well. So if there's a topic you want covered, please just let us know. It's best if you do it inside the program. I always try and respond to emails, but those of you who send me emails know that it can take me a little bit of time to get back to you. So I will always try and get back to you on the emails, but you have to bear with me on that one. So if there's a topic you want
I
covered.
have one more comment, Toyin,
Okay.
from Anthony McFall. Says, great show, family. I've enjoyed it greatly. I'll share it. I'm from Louisiana in the United States.
Asha, and thank you. And be safe out there. You know,
Yes.
the United States is going through a strange time where you have this bizarre election between two people who are, well, they're not the best that the America has to offer for leadership, and white supremacy is on the rise. So, Sister Oleander, I don't know if there's anything you want to say before we sign off.
No, I think yes, it was a really good show. Actually, I quite enjoyed it. Maybe I'm not supposed to, but I did quite enjoy
You're
the show.
okay to enjoy.
And I just want to say to everybody, you know, just please do enjoy the sun as we have it, and just take care of yourselves as well, and just mind how you go, as they say.
Yeah, thank you. And you know, I don't know much more to say to that, really. Just a reminder that we'll be back on Sunday, the 26th of May. We're going to try and aim for 6 p.m. So hopefully it'll be a little bit earlier, and hopefully the program will be a little bit shorter. But we'll try. I won't promise, as you know, timing, and you know, we did aim for 6 o'clock today, but putting a program together takes a lot of time as well. You know, so that kind of like makes it a bit trickier. Yeah. And so enjoy the sun, as Sister Oleander suggests. And as ever, please walk good, be safe, and may the ancestors continue to guide and protect us. Ashe.
Ashe, but we do have two comments that have just come in. FP Comms, we love you too, Sis Oleander, and the work you do. That's sweet. Thank you. And Anthony says, I'd like to learn more about Beresford Edwards, aka Nana Bonus of the UK. And then he says Nana Bonsu.
Yes. Okay. Right. We'll have to look into that one. Thank you for sharing that. Give thanks. Ashe.